Hello everyone and welcome to the first lesson of Muse. I'm really excited about this course, and in this first lesson we're going to be doing a little bit of review just to get you eased into all the things that we're going to be doing during this course. There's a lot that we're going to be taking on during this course: research, analysis, and writing. So let's go ahead and start as slowly as possible so that we don't get overwhelmed. Today's lesson is called Classification and Question Outlines. If you took our time capsule class, you are probably familiar with question outlines, but in case you aren't, we're going to be taking some time to review that. We're also going to be talking about classification. So let's go ahead and start with just a general introduction to the class. Welcome to Muse. Muse has three main parts, as you can see illustrated in the graphic to the right. Muse is all about writing, analysis, and research. So let's quickly go ahead and define these terms. So analysis is where we take something apart so that we can understand it better, to see what it's made out of. And when you take something apart, you just kind of understand how it works and understand it much more thoroughly. So that's what analysis is all about. Now, research is where you investigate something in order to find new information about a subject. So if you don't know how to get to Walmart, you would do some research, looking online, finding out directions, and then you have some new information. You know how to get to Walmart. So that's what research is. And if you were able to take website, you learn some good online researching skills. And lastly, we are also going to be doing writing. The goal is to write an essay a week. And you might think, oh, that's really overwhelming, but actually it's not. If you were able to take our airborne course, you actually wrote more than one essay per week. So I know that you can do it. If you took time capsule in the fall, it's been a while since then, so you've had more time to work on your writing skills, and I think this is a good goal that we can set for this course. So writing, analysis, and research, putting them all together into this Muse course where we'll think about things, we'll research them, and then share our thoughts with others. So let's go ahead and get into the new part of today's lesson, which is classification. That's kind of a big word. What does it mean to classify something? Well, to classify something is to arrange, it could be a group of people or a group of things, to arrange something in classes or categories according to shared qualities or characteristics. Okay, so that's still a little bit complicated. Let's go ahead and make this even simpler. To classify something is basically to find similarities, to find things that are the same. So dogs have four legs, cats have four legs, they're the same in that way. Or pillows are soft and moss is soft, they are both soft. We are classifying those things. We're pointing out how they are similar, and we are putting them in a group, a class, a category. So that's what it means to classify something. Let's go ahead and give an example in case you're a little bit confused. Classical music, I'm not exactly sure why it's called classical music, but referring to music that's not pop music and that's not like jazz, referring to classical music. There are actually many different types of classical music. They can be classified into various categories. You'll see here in this diagram, there's medieval music, way back when, and then Renaissance music, Baroque music, that's like Bach, Scarlatti, classical music, that's Beethoven, and maybe because Beethoven is so well known, that's why they call all music classical music. Classical music is actually just one period of music. And then there's also the Romantic period, and that doesn't mean lovey-dovey songs, it means songs that were written during a certain period of time. So composers like Chopin and Rachmaninoff were Romantic period writers or composers. And then there's also modern music. So Prokofiev and Shostakovich, people like that, wrote more modern times. So by finding similarities between different classical pieces, you can group them into different time periods, or you can classify them into different time periods. So that gives you an example of what it means to classify something. It basically means to group things. One more example, if you studied biology or would like to study biology, you'll learn about how animals and various other creatures are classified into different species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdoms. So um, there's this huge complicated system for classifying animals, so I can't explain everything in this video, but you can see in this chart that a bear, for instance, is in this particular species, Ursus arctos. Now, if we back up a little bit, there is a genus, so another category that's a little bit broader. Not only includes brown bears, but also black bears. And now if we back up a little further, there's even an even bigger category, a family that includes brown bears, black bears, and panda bears. Now if we go to an even bigger category, there is order Carnivora, where we have carnivores, so animals that eat meat. And then if we back up even further, we have class Mammalia, mammals, so you can see that all these are mammals. Phylum Chordata, I'm not exactly sure how these are classified, but I do know that kingdom Animalia, as it sounds, is the kingdom of animals, so you can see that these are all animals. So again, I can't quite go into detail about how to classify all music or how to classify all animals, but that just gives you an idea of what it means to classify something, basically to group something. You can group music, you can group animals, and you can group basically anything. So that's what it means to classify. Okay, so we're going to move on to, I'm going to share with you the assignment for this week. As I said, we're going to be writing an essay, and this is the question that I want you to answer in that essay. You'll notice that I use a lot of questions in the way that I teach essay writing, and that's because I think questions really get your brain thinking. If I were to share this prompt with you as a statement, it might not automatically trigger a lot of ideas in your brain, but if you ask it as a question, I think our brains are programmed to automatically think of answers. So that's why I'm writing this as a question, and you'll notice the word classified in this question, which is why we spent time talking about classification. Classification is one way that we can analyze various objects or various people. So here is the question that we're going to be answering in our essay this week. In the 20th century, how was a person classified as a first, second, or third class passenger? And this is specifically talking about a passenger aboard the Titanic. So that will be an optional reading assignment that we'll get to a little later in our lesson. So this is our question, focusing on the 20th century. In that century, how was a person classified as a first, second, or third class passenger? So in other words, if there was this person, how do you determine which class he was assigned to? How do you know what is the difference between a third and a first class passenger? Can a third class passenger suddenly become a first class passenger? And how does that system all work? How are people classified? So that's the question we're going to be working on this week, and in order to answer that question, we'll first need to create a question outline, and we'll need to write, and then use that to write a 5-paragraph analytic research essay. So we have a lot of work to do. You might think, this is too hard, this is overwhelming. Well, let's just go ahead and start with that first part, creating a question outline. As I said earlier, questions really help get our brains thinking. So we're going to create an entire outline of questions that will help us with our research and will help us think through our ideas as well as the actual writing part. So give me a second to pull up our question outline. So on the website, you should be able to download this file. And if you were part of Time Capsule, it probably will look familiar to you. An essay has 5 paragraphs. That's why we have 5 Roman numerals: introduction paragraph, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, and then a conclusion paragraph. So introduction, conclusion, and then 3 middle paragraphs. That makes up our 5 paragraphs for our 5-paragraph essay. So this looks kind of complicated. That it actually isn't as complicated as it looks. Remember, a question outline is simply like a big chart of questions that will help us organize our thoughts, organize our research. So let's go ahead and start with the introduction paragraph. And let's jump to line C. See how it says main question thesis. So what is the main question we are trying to answer in this essay? Do you remember? I'll hop back here. It's right here. In the 20th century, how is a person classified as a first, second, or third class passenger? So in order to start working on your question outline, simply copy that question on this line here. It looks a little short, so hopefully you can fit it there. So that wasn't too hard. All you had to do was copy that main question. Now what do we have here on this top line? We have something called a hook question. Now a hook is something that gets your readers interested in what you're writing about. If you were to just share your thesis right off the bat, they might not feel interested in it. So we need to have something to draw them in. So this is the question outline. We need a question to help us think of how can we do that? How can we get our readers interested in what we are going to say? So there is another file that you can download. It's just a list of various hook questions that you can use to get your readers interested in your topic. So you can choose a history hook question, a culture, or a story, or a viewpoint question. So choose one of these questions that seem interesting to you, that seem to have some potential, and copy it on this line here. So for instance, remember we're talking about first, second, and third class passengers. Let's say that you wanted to use this question. What does God say about this subject? So copy that right here, and you'll start off your essay by talking about what God says about treating people differently as first, second, and third class passengers. And that might get people interested in your main point and be a nice transition into your essay. So that's what a hook question is, and that is how you'll do it. You'll simply choose one from this list. So again, super easy. So we have a hook question here. Now once we share that story or share the information, we need to transition into our thesis. So I've already written the question here. It's basically transitioning from this hook to the thesis. So you don't have to do anything for line B. Line C we already talked about. You'll just copy that main question, and line D is already done for you. So we talked about one whole paragraph so far. Let's go ahead and now talk about body paragraphs. All three body paragraphs are the same. So I'm going to hop back to our PowerPoint because I have the paragraph questions written for you. You'll notice that question outlines aren't super fancy, and that's okay. They're not supposed to be super fancy. They're just supposed to help you organize your thoughts. So again, there's our main question, but we'll also have a question for each paragraph to focus on. We can't just have each paragraph sort of drifting through our topic. We need to be super organized. Each paragraph will have its own question to answer. And the questions, as I mentioned, will be very simple. So paragraph 1, we'll simply talk about first-class passengers. How was a person classified as a first-class passenger? Paragraph 2, how is a person classified as a second-class passenger? In paragraph 3, how is a person classified as a third-class passenger? So not super fancy, very straightforward. Let's go ahead and copy these into our outline. You'll see a line that says paragraph question. So copy paragraph question 1 here, paragraph question 2 there, and paragraph 3 question here. So that wasn't super hard. Now you'll notice there's also something called sub-questions. 2 sub-questions in each paragraph. Now we have our main question, which is the main point of the whole essay. We have a paragraph question that identifies the main point of each paragraph. Now these sub-questions will help us develop that main point of the paragraph. So we can't simply answer the question and move on. We need to take time to prove that point or to develop that point. So let me go ahead and type this up a second. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I've typed the first paragraph question here. How is a person classified as a first-class passenger? How can we answer that question? How can we develop that point? Well, let's go ahead and think. What are some ways that people were classified as first, second, or third class passengers? You might learn about this when you read your optional reading assignment, and we'll also learn more about this when we do our research project. But let me go ahead and give you some hints. People were classified based on numerous factors. Some of them had different occupations, and that affected whether they were a first, second, or third class passenger. So there's occupations that affected that. Also, their social status, just their general social status. There was more of a division between the rich and the poor. So their social status. Also, just the price of the tickets. First class tickets were more expensive, so some people just couldn't afford a first class ticket. Also, you could research and see if gender or if ethnicity played a part in that. And also wealth, just the person's general wealth or fame. All those factors played a part in whether they were classified as first, second, or third. So let's choose one of those. Let's say, how did a person's occupation affect one second. Trying to think of an easy way to put this into words. I'm just going to write that. How did a person's social status affect his class? And then for your second sub-question, let's say that you want to talk about their wealth. So how did a person's wealth affect his or her class? So these two questions will help develop this main point. So that's kind of a big question. How is a person classified as a first class passenger? So if we kind of break it down into, and we focus on two aspects of that, their social status and their wealth, that will help us develop that point much better. So hopefully those ideas that I shared will help you come up with those sub-questions. You'll notice that a lot of these questions start with words like how, what, where, why. So I would recommend starting your question, your sub-questions, with a word like that, and then just keeping it really simple. I wanted to try to think of a way that made this question super simple. So don't make it fancy, just say the basics. And remember, the purpose of sub-questions is to help you develop this main or this paragraph question. So in other words, we're going to be analyzing two aspects, two ways that a person's class could be affected, their social status and their wealth. So I hope that makes sense. The main question I have already written for you. The paragraph questions are already written for you. You will need to work on these sub-questions, and I would recommend using words like what, where, why, how. Words like that are really helpful when you're writing questions. So for the second paragraph, you would copy down the paragraph question, paragraph 2, and then come up with two sub-questions, and then copy down the paragraph question for paragraph 3, come up with your own two sub-questions, and then for the conclusion paragraph, the purpose of a conclusion paragraph is to just reiterate everything that you said in the paragraph, in the essay, so that everyone remembers your main point, and then just to boil it down to your main point of your main point. So go ahead and just copy down paragraph 1 question on this line, paragraph 2 question on this line, and paragraph 3 question on this line. That will help us reiterate our main points. and then copy down the main question one more time on line E. See, it says main question. So a lot of this is just copying down, and it's not super hard. The main thing you need to work on are these sub-questions, coming up with your own sub-questions. So I hope this wasn't overwhelming for you. It's really hard to try to share everything about question outlines in one lesson, so I hope this has made sense. If you have questions, please let me know. So we have our main question and 3 paragraph questions. Let's go ahead and go over the assignments for today. Watch the video lesson, and then you have an optional reading assignment to read Chapter 7 from A Night to Remember. A Night to Remember is a really great fact-based historical account of the night that the Titanic sank. So it can give you a lot of good background topics, since a lot of our, or actually all of our writing prompts, our essay prompts for this class will be based on the Titanic. So if you want some background information, or if you've already started to read this book, that would be a great idea. Also complete the question outline. We went over that today, how to do that. A lot of it is just simple copying, and some of it you do have to come up with your own questions, but I'm sure you can do that. And lastly, submit your progress report. So we have come to the end of Lesson 1, Classification and Question Outlines. There's a lot to cover in this lesson. I hope I was able to break it down so that's easy enough for you to understand. The new thing that we learned was classification, and then we also talked about question outlines. That might be a review for some of you, and it might be new for others. So if you have any questions, please let me know.